On today's episode of Dr. Momcast, we talk to Chris Golic, CEO of the Golic family. Chris and her husband Mike, a former NFL player and radio and TV personality, raised 3 kids who went on to play collegiate sports at Notre Dame. Chris shares with us pearls of wisdom on raising elite athletes. She has devoted many hours to organizations that are passionate about improving youth sports safety. Chris also shares funny stories about her family, and you can hear many more entertaining anecdotes on the family's podcast called Sorry in Advance, the Golic Family Podcast.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Dr. Momcast. I am Dr. Marla Shapiro here with some of my favorite sports neuropsychology colleagues.
Dr. Alyssa Wickland.
Dr. Beth Pura.
Dr. Elisa Nippold-Baca.
And we are here to talk about kids, health, sports, safety, anything else that comes up along the way. And I am very curious to hear how your college drop-offs went last week, but I'm also very eager to have Beth introduce us to her friend, colleague, and our guest tonight.
So I'm very excited to have my friend Chris Golic join us tonight.
I was listening to your last podcast, about sending the kids off to college.
Oh, you did? Bring back some memories, Chris?
It was really good. Yeah, I'm right at the doorstep of Notre Dame, and they started classes today. So I know what you guys are going through. I saw it all going on today and over the weekend when kids are getting dropped off. So it's a bittersweet moment for sure.
So, Chris, thank you so much for joining us. I met Chris through our work with the USA Football Heads Up organization, and Chris and I traveled and talked to parents about sports safety and football in particular. Chris is also the wife of Mike Golic, a Hall of Fame broadcaster and former NFL player, and loving mother to 3 children, Jake, Mike, and Sydney, mother-in-law to Jen and Ben, as well as grandma to Jackson and future baby coming up. Very exciting. Her daughter Sydney's expecting. We're really happy to have Chris here because Chris has experiences that I think a lot of our listeners will be interested in. Throughout our podcast, we talked about our own children and their athletic abilities or lack thereof. None of our children are going to be playing at the elite level, and Chris has guided her kids through those experiences. It's going to be helpful to get some advice from a very sage woman. So thanks so much for joining us, Chris. We're really excited to have you.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. You guys, your podcast is great. I've enjoyed listening to it. I think you put a lot of information out there that's really relevant and important and in a fun way. So it's good to join the crowd.
Thank you. We just entertain ourselves and let people listen, really, Chris.
It's self-serving.
Our husbands are taking care of our children right now, so we can hide up here. So it's all good.
I see you have wine glasses while you're doing this.
I know, right? We have a caffeine. And I told Chris that we do not use the video on the podcast because none of us want to do our hair and makeup.
Do you think that would really change my habits?
Probably not, Marvin. One of the things we love about you, honey.
Well, I said only when we get a hair and makeup budget will I be willing.
Fair.
Yeah.
One of the things I want to talk about is USA Football Heads Up that Chris and I were both involved in. Chris, to tell people what it is and why did you get involved in the USA Football Heads Up program?
I thought it was a crossroads for football. I felt like it was a little bit under attack, and the story that was being told about it was kind of one-sided at that point. So I felt it was good to have a voice out there for parents to listen to, coming from parents themselves. I was dealing with my kids were in high school and college when Heads Up Football started. So I was living and going through what those other parents were doing. And I thought of a voice that talked about it and give an opinion without judging and let parents make their own decision. I thought it was important from parents to hear from someone like that.
What was that time frame? You said your kids were in high school and college. Do you remember what year that was?
Yeah, it was around 2012 when Heads Up Football started. So I had a couple kids in college and my daughter was still in high school.
Chris was an early adopter.
Yeah.
Beth, Chris, can y'all explain for people that may not know what exactly Heads Up Football is and what's involved?
The basic premise is that they want to make sure that there's a consistency of training and safety regulations in football. USA Football is the national governing body for youth football. The problem is it's a very chaotic environment, meaning there's a lot of different leagues that don't have to follow a lot of rules. And so USA Football was working hard to try to get information out to all these different leagues across the country. Was it something like 13,000 different football leagues or something, Chris? Some incredible number.
Leagues?
Leagues. Yeah, leagues.
Wow.
Not teams, leagues.
Does that include Pop Warner or is that involved, or is it separate?
Pop Warner is one of the biggest leagues, but
Okay.
even within Pop Warner, there's different leagues, different
Wow.
divisions. And so it's really fragmented landscape. But the idea is that we know there are things that we can do to help reduce injuries in football, but people need to know it. The USA Football created this heads up program to try to teach tackling that keeps the head out of the game. It also does things like teach proper fit of helmets, teaching signs and symptoms of concussion, teaching other safety issues relevant to football. I think anyone can get behind, even if your kids don't play football, you can certainly get behind the notion of educating parents and athletes and coaches and officials on the current state of the science when it comes to safety and kids.
And I tried to create some uniformity between all of these leagues that were kind of doing it every which way. They at least wanted to have a few pillars to build your foundation on that were important, like coach certification, equipment, the proper tackling form. And they've built off that. But that's the fundamental idea behind Heads Up Football.
I talked to a lot of parents who were getting pushback saying that they were abusing their child by allowing them to play football. And I know parents who were sort of ashamed to say, my kid's on the football team. Were you getting some of that feedback when your kids were playing?
You always heard it from other parents, and especially when it came to the forefront around 2011, 2012. That was when parents really honed in and started putting peer pressure on other parents. But I was talking to Sydney the other day, and she coaches at an Orange Theory Fitness. So she talks to a lot of moms, and they know she's pregnant. And they asked her, knowing that her husband played football, are you going to let your son or daughter play football if they want to play? And she said, absolutely. And Ben, whose career was cut short because of a concussion, has no hesitancy in letting their son play football if they have a son at some point. Because like we've always told them, there's so much more that you gain from sports if it's taught correctly. You can minimize injury, hopefully, but it's a part of the game. It's a rough sport.
I listened to an interview that you had done, but you brought up a really good point that football is safer today by far than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that if ever you were going to let your child play football, today's the day to do it with the
Right.
rules and regulations in place.
Right. My kids in high school were right on the cusp, right before all the concussion protocol came in. So I had a son who went back out on the field after having a concussion. So I've seen it, and then I've seen the changes. And really, it's the last decade for football and sports in general. The changes have been seismic. I feel like sports are in a really good place right now. Can there always be more? Sure, we're always learning more, but I feel pretty good about where it's at right now for the young people.
We're in agreement with you, Chris, on that.
Do y'all feel like at various levels of youth sports, rec sports, high school sports, has this message trickled down and these heads up techniques are still well accepted?
Oh, I think it definitely has. It's had a whole decade, like I said, to trickle down. And I think that we're seeing it across the board in hockey, like they're relooking at things. And I think it's had a ripple effect into other sports, soccer and whatnot. So yeah, definitely.
Agreed. For a long time, a lot of other sports said concussion is football's problem. And when they came to find out is that, oh no, we have a lot of concussions in soccer and hockey and basketball and wrestling and lacrosse and cheerleading and volleyball and we came to understand that this is something that we need to be addressing across sports. And I agree with you. I think the work that a lot of organizations have done in regards to football, those lessons have been transferred to other sports.
Sure. I think you should be concerned no matter what sport your child plays. I mean, my daughter Sydney got a concussion swimming. So she ran into the bulkhead and she got a concussion. I always said, part of your job of a parent is to protect your children, but it's also to let your kids explore things and try things and do what they love. And your job as a parent is to put them in the best position to succeed. And part of it is safety, but part of it is letting go and letting them try the things that they want to try.
You are a mother to 3 children who all played at the collegiate level. Obviously, very good genes and a lot of hard work. Even if your dad's a former professional athlete, not only makes get you so far, right? A lot of hard work. What was that journey like for your kids to work to that level? Was there experiences they had that you could share with somebody out there who thinks that maybe their child is bound for collegiate sport?
I think it's pretty evident when your kids are, you kind of get a sense when they're playing, especially in high school. You start to see a little bit of separation between those who will go to the collegiate level and those who won't. That's the first thing. I think kids are always aware of who, like, especially on their team or whatnot, they always know who the players are. Even when they go to college, they know who the best players are on the team. They're very self-aware in that respect. But yeah, it was a lot of hard work and there was a lot of pressure because my husband went to Notre Dame. Both of his brothers went to Notre Dame. I went to St. Mary's. My sister went to St. Mary's. It was a thing. And I did a lot of brainwashing when my kids were young. I bought notebooks and pencils.
You're indoctrinating everybody.
I was. Each time they opened their notebook at school to remember what they were working for and blah, blah, small little messages. But the third one, Sydney, she was under a lot of pressure. Both of her brothers were at Notre Dame and she was swimming and she would get in the car every night from swim practice and she would say, what if they don't want me? What if I'm not good enough? So there was a lot of self-pressure put on her. And I said, it's all going to work out. She kept saying, I'm going to community college and sleeping in your basement if it doesn't work out. Like, it was all in. And that was a little scary because it could have not worked out, but it did. But it's interesting. I've done a lot of thinking back and a lot has changed in collegiate sports since my kids were in school. It's the NIL, nutrition, social media.
What does NIL mean?
Name, image, likeness.
Yes, where they can make money off of themselves in college. That wasn't around when my kids were in school. I can only speak for Notre Dame, but they've honed in a lot more. We were really surprised when our kids went to Notre Dame around 2008, 2009. Notre Dame is wanting to keep their student athletes within the general population. They want them to experience the same thing the general population is. And I don't think that that's a realistic model anymore. And I think they're starting to realize that. The demands on student athlete are really different than the average student. I know that Sydney, they room you with a regular student. And that sounds good in theory until you have to get up for 5 a.m. practice. and your roommate's up till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. They don't have to get up the next day. The lifestyle you lead is just very different. That was a hurdle when she first got to school. But just looking back and thinking, social media is such a big thing now for kids to deal with, people criticizing them. That was just starting when my kids were in school. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if I did everything right or I just got really lucky. Let's put it that way.
Nobody just get really lucky when it comes to kids. It's all good parenting.
You can't prove luck.
Yeah. No, it's exactly right. Did you play a sport, Chris?
I did not. And it was interesting. I was texting the family group text today and I was saying I was coming on your podcast and I was looking, and this includes Jenny, Ben, Sydney, Mikey, Jake, and my husband. I stopped and paused for the first time. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm the only one in this group text who was not a collegiate athlete. I was just the facilitator. I asked them, looking back now that you're older and wiser, would you have done anything different when you were in college? And they all said, every single one of them said the nutrition portion.
Interesting. And did they say in what particular they would do differently?
They would just keep their diet a little more strict. Sydney said on the weekend, go out and do some shots and have 6 pancakes. Like she said, I've had a good time. She would admit that she maybe had a little bit too good of a time sometimes. I think the hardest part about your kids going to college as a collegiate athlete is like letting them go, because I controlled everything. I controlled their meals. I controlled taking them to practice. And when they're 18, they decide when they're going to eat, when they're going to go to bed. You kind of just have to let go. And not everything went the way I wanted it to go when my kids were in school. But you know what? They were young adults. They earned the right to be there. And I had to let them do what they wanted to do. It was their experience for college. So.
Are you trying to make me and Alyssa cry? We've been gone for 4 days.
Yeah.
What do you think they might say about some of the benefits of being a student athlete?
You learn great time management because you have a pretty tight schedule. You learn what it means to be a teammate and have other people depending on you. You have to keep your grades up because you need to be on the field for the other people. And I think physical fitness, it's been a big part of my kids' family, you know, what they do and how they live their lives. They're still all very active. And I think that becomes a lifelong thing because it's part of your identity, really. When my kids were in college, one of the things that I noticed is I had a son who got hurt and just kept falling down the depth chart because of injuries and whatnot. The mental health aspect in college now is so much better. They did not have any resources to speak of when my kids were there. Now that's the focal point. And I thought it was really important. In fact, I wrote something on it way back when, just saying that like when kids go to college and they are a part of a team and then all of a sudden maybe they're hurt, they've completely lost their identity. That's who they've been their whole life. That's who their friends are. We're just kind of left to figure it out on their own. I really loved how you guys talked about in your last podcast, how you should go and make an appointment right away with someone on campus so that if you need them, you're already in the system. I think the huge thing, because I saw my son, Jake, from far away, be depressed, be sad. And I didn't really have anybody to turn to as far as what should we do. It was really hard because you're only as happy as your least happy kid.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Thinking about childhood, middle school, high school, it seems like kids have become increasingly obsessed with 365-day-a-year focus on that sport. And if that was true for your kids, or if, how things have maybe changed, or what you would recommend for parents even earlier in their journey.
Beth and I talked about it so many times when we went out with people. My kids played every sport. I wanted them to try everything. And we always said, what you're good at 8 years old isn't necessarily what you're going to be good at 13 years old. One sport can help another sport. You might find your niche later on with a sport that you like. I think you just need to let your kids be open to the idea of trying many things, not even just sports. Let your kids be involved with whatever they like. If it's theater, encourage them to go all in on it and be involved. I think that's how you find a group of friends that you belong with, and it helps you build confidence in who you are.
Absolutely. We had a podcast with Linda Flanagan, who wrote this great book called Take Back the Game. And one of the things that she said that we keep talking about, your kids should be able to say there's 5 things they love. They may love football, or soccer, or whatever, but they also love their dog and they love painting or whatever, so that you are encouraging a diversity of interest and enjoyment, because they may get cut from the team. They may get injured out. They may just decide they don't really like that sport anymore. And they need to be able to fall back on some other identity, not just solely whatever their sport is. You're learning different skills too, even just from a use of muscle and different footwork in one sport is applicable to the other. There's just so much advantages to a kid being a multi-sport athlete, but it's hard these days because club and travel and everything, they make such demands of these kids.
Chris, you talked about when your kid's sidelined with an injury, just how they lose their sense of identity. Did I read that your husband is retiring also?
He's
or
not
changing
really
positions or
jobs. Yeah, he was at ESPN
Okay.
for like 20 some years, and he's starting a new show with my oldest son. And DraftKings is starting a network, and they're going to be together again.
Oh,
So
we have an exclusive.
Yes. But my question is, what commonality did you see with the struggles that come along with retirement from sport?
it's hard. I feel for athletes who don't know what they want to do when they're done. My husband was fortunate. He had the gift of gab. He had been doing things all along with TV while he was playing. So he just slid into his next role in life. But my oldest son, too, did the same thing. Ben did the same thing, too. He knew he wanted to be a doctor, so he just moved on to the next thing. But my son, Jake, he didn't quite know what he wanted to be. And he ended up he owns 2 Orange Theory Fitnesses in Boston. We knew that he wasn't a guy who was going to sit behind a desk. He was active all his life. His wife, Jenny, ran track at Notre Dame. So they were both heavy into fitness. So it was a perfect fit for them. But it's not always easy to find what your next act is. And that can be hard for people because you've done the same thing for your whole life. But I think schools, and even if you make it to the NFL, there's so many programs out there if you take advantage of them to help you try to find your way.
One of the things we talked about is the disappointment and the losses. Even when your kids were in high school and college, how did you handle the losses? Those car rides home when it didn't go so well, either in the pool or on the field?
Let them decompress first. The first thing you don't want to do is pounce on them right after. And they're still in their feelings and having a hard time with it. But after they decompress, like all of us, you can have an open conversation about what went on and what maybe they can do better and how they feel about it. We experienced losing at Pop Warner, and then we experienced losing in the national championship against Alabama, which we relive as a family, like on a weekly basis. It will haunt us for all of our life. Some of them you can't let go. All you can do is be there for your kids and talk to them and and listen to them. Mike and I always said we think there's two kinds of parents, those who don't want to know much and then those who are open to knowing everything. We're one of those parents who probably know too much about our kids, like in college and whatnot. We knew everything that was going on for the most part. I won't say that
everything, Chris, really.
a lot more than most. Let's put it that way.
3 shots and 6 pancakes.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
she's
yeah.
in a lot.
Yeah, but I think that by being a parent who's open to maybe knowing things that you don't necessarily want to hear all the time, you get to really know who your kid is. I feel like otherwise their friends in college will be talking about them and saying, oh, how funny he is. And you might not see it the same way because you don't know how they're experiencing your child. We always said we were open to hearing the good and the bad and the ugly. I'm sure some of it was filtered, but I would highly recommend it.
Yeah. I love that. And we talked a lot last week on that college episode about letting your kid know you're not in trouble. If you come to me and tell me XYZ, you're not going to get in trouble. The hard part of parenting is actually standing by your words, because when they call and say, hey, mom, I'm trashed at this party, we promise them that we're not going to get mad and we do want to hear it. And so God bless you. And what a life skill that you have acquired to be able to listen to that stuff.
It doesn't mean I always like it.
And not have that what? What did you do?
Yeah.
I do have 2
Yes,
boys.
yes,
Yeah. Man.
Boys are an inch deep and a mile wide. What you see is usually what you get with boys. There are all these emotions when there's always a lot going on and there's always drama. Even when they're 28 years old.
Chris, I was thinking about something you said. Of course, you bringing up national championships, go dogs.
Oh, boy.
Let's slip that in there.
Oh, boy.
So you talked about when your kids are young, that they're going to be something special. So how do parents decide you're out of your mind, you're dreaming, or to nurture those kids that might have a spark that has yet to be realized or recognized?
See, that's the thing I always thought is that I'm not going to put someone's spark out. If a kid really wants to try something and is passionate about it, at the end, they might be disappointed. But I still think as a parent, there's plenty of people who poke holes in your kids' dreams out there. Your job as a parent is to fill their bucket of confidence, and because there's plenty of outside sources that are going to tear them down. I always felt like my job was to build them up. And I always said if they had a dream, I was going to do everything as a parent to try to facilitate them to achieving their dream. And if it doesn't work out, then it doesn't work out, but you figure it out after it doesn't work out. My kids all had aspirations, the 2 boys, about playing in the pros. Most kids that go to college do, but most don't play in the pros. And so there was disappointment when it comes to that. If you're working with your kid and talking to your kid as they're getting older, those kind of things are already in place, I feel like, for them to be able to handle it when the time comes.
And they had extra pressure. I mean, their dad is a former NFL player. People had these expectations for them. It's an extra burden on them that most kids don't have. So the fact that you prepared them that they could still handle that loss speaks to how they were raised, really.
Yeah. I like to talk about, too, Ben, Sydney's husband, came from a very small town in Indiana, southern Indiana, called Ferdinand, who it's way far south and it's very small. And he still managed to be found and build his skills to go to Harvard, to play in the NFL for a few years. It can happen anywhere. That's why I say as a parent, you kind of let your kids do what they want to do, support them, and see how it shakes out.
Did you talk to them about Plan Bs when they were like, my kids are 11 and 14, and they're obviously, Beth, you ruled my kids out already. You said that none of our kids are going pro.
Sorry, I should not be a dream crusher.
You're poking holes in their dreams, man.
They don't listen to our podcast. Come on.
Sure. I know. But Chris, did you talk about Plan Bs kind of throughout life of like, what else would you like to do? Or what would you like to do as encore?
Sure. My one son always kind of wanted to follow in my husband's footsteps. So he majored in communications when he was at Notre Dame. Jake, he didn't know what he wanted to do, but we always were talking him through it while he was in school. And he was taking classes that were going to build a foundation for him. But it's not always clear. Sydney, she majored in communications too. She ended up working for the Bears for a few years in their social media department. So everybody's path is kind of different. And I think it's always important to say you're going to need your college degree. You can't bank on your dream happening. If it does, wow, it's great. But you always have to be thinking like one step ahead. What am I going to do next if this doesn't work out?
What about those kids that ditch college because they're lured by big bucks and they're recruited before they finish degrees? Sounds like that's something you might not have encouraged.
Well,
Well, everybody's different. At that point, the ones that are usually lured by big bucks, they are pretty solid players. But you see players all the time go back and get their degrees and say they promised their mom that they would finish their education. I think you can do both. I don't think that they necessarily have to go in any particular order. If you have an opportunity to make millions of dollars and change your life or get generational wealth, go for it. I mean, and then figure it out after. Go back. Like I know Mikey has a few friends that they left school early. They were high draft picks and they went back and they got their degree and they're now working in the business world and they're successful in a different area. So there's no set course. I know society says go to college and then you get a job, but sometimes it works out for kids where you don't finish college and you go where the wind takes you.
Or the money.
Yeah, exactly. I always laugh when I'd see the Bears players and they left in junior year. And I'm
Right.
always like, is your mom on you to finish that degree? And they're always like, oh, yeah.
Is anybody watching the Stephen Curry documentary on Apple Plus? He is getting his degree.
Oh, he is.
Really?
Oh,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So he sits around his kitchen on the computer and he's having a one-on-one with his academic advisor. And here's the how many time champion with kids
Yeah.
crawling all over him and he's getting his degree. Same thing. Told mom, I'll get that degree.
Awesome.
But yeah, of course, he makes more money in 30 seconds
gonna
than we
say-
all do in a year. But
He doesn't need a degree, but yeah.
He doesn't need the degree. But to your point, sometimes it's a personal goal. Sometimes it's a family goal.
Absolutely.
yeah, I don't think he's going to do entry-level customer service or anything with that.
Doesn't need to go to the recruitment fair.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So, Chris, you listened to our podcast last week talking about launching a kid to
Mhm.
college. You've been it. You live right off the Notre Dame campus.
Yep.
Anything that you would add or anything that you think my personal experience was helpful to me when I launched my kids to college?
I want to know which one wanted to put the air tag in this.
That was Alyssa.
I am not ashamed.
Did you do it?
I did not do it.
Okay.
I didn't know better, but at the time,
Where is your child away from home, are they?
he is 10 hours away. He's going to be just fine. It's really more the connection and wanting to know where he is and what he's doing. And I think that was my acting out.
I get it. You're entitled to do that, but
Metaphorically, I wasn't really going to put the air tag in there.
that's so funny. But I feel like you guys have FaceTime, you have texting. I still talk to my kids every day. They'll give me a quick call and say what's going on and tell me what's happening. And I FaceTime my grandson every day. So
Aw.
I would say don't be afraid to reach out to him because he'll probably be really happy to hear from you and just keep that connection going. For as much as they love being away, they'll be homesick a little bit.
That gives me encouragement. I appreciate that. And you know what? Truly, to your point, he doesn't have to answer the phone or
Right.
respond to the text. If it's bothering him, he has the control. But the flip side is you're keeping the connection if they want it. So that's
Right.
great advice.
And I think
I want sign of life. I want signs of life.
the thing is, if you can't answer a phone right away, you can text on your own time. It gives you a little more latitude with responding.
And
Yeah.
if they're ghosting, you can threaten not to pay tuition. So,
That's true. That's true. You still ultimately
No. More effective is why should I continue to pay for your cellular plan if you're not?
oh, that's very good advice, Dr.
Yes.
Shapiro. Yes.
Yeah.
That would really hurt him where it counts.
Yeah, hit him where it hurts.
Yeah, exactly.
Logical consequences at its finest. So I don't know. This is a random question. I was thinking, Chris, about your daughter as a swimmer, and I work with a lot of kids around sleep. And I wondered, is she just somebody who had good genes and could sleep less than most? Or how did y'all navigate sleep and balance and sanity doing pretty intense training in this as a swimmer?
When she was a young girl, she was really tough on our family. When it was time to go to bed, she wanted everybody to be quiet. She was really type A about her day. In 7th and 8th grade, she started waking up and going to 5 a.m. practice.
Yeah.
And then doing a practice in the evening. And it was pretty intense. Sleep is such a big component. She was really good about it. I tell the story when she was in about 4th grade. It doesn't really have to do with sleep, but it just talks about how my daughter's personality was. She had gone to swim practice on Halloween. And she went out to go trick-or-treating with her friends after swim practice. And she would go to the corner of the block and lay in the grass and make her friends take her bag to the door and say, my friend is really tired from swim practice. Can you put candy in her bag?
That is awesome.
Yeah. So, I mean, she was pretty tuned in and locked in about sleep. She was good about it. I say if you don't want your kids to get in trouble, make them a swimmer because they are too tired to even think about finding trouble. I mean,
It's brutal.
it's brutal, but she loved it. So we went with it. And I mean, it's kind of a brutal sport for parents too.
I was just say, yeah.
Yeah. We sat at a meet we figured it out. We were at the pool for 20 hours and she swam for 4 minutes and 50 seconds. We were glad she was the last child who wanted to swim because you see all the kids at swim meets lined up with their iPads. The little kids, they were the siblings of the swimmers. It's a tough sport for families for sure. She loved it. She hasn't been in the pool since she finished college.
Wow. It hasn't?
Not to swim.
Really?
No, not to swim laps. I thought that was interesting. Some of her friends went back into doing triathlons and stuff. Not said she's not ready for it yet. It's tough. It's just you in the bottom of the pool.
I was a rec swimmer and I was a swing coach, but no, didn't want to do the mornings year round. And so that's why I swam only in the summer. No way I was giving it my mornings.
And everybody finds where their point is of what they're willing to commit to. Everybody's not built for it. I wouldn't have been built for what she went through, but you know what? It's really done her well for being a tough cookie. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. As parents, and we see so many parents around us who are trying to fit a square peg into a round hole with their kids and push them when the ability just might not be there. But like you said, your daughter, who was an elite swimmer, would get very frustrated with the people around her because she was managing her bedtime. She was making these choices for herself and she was managing her own schedule because she was invested. You guys weren't putting her to bed as a 17-year-old at 8 p.m. saying you have to get up at 4:30 to get to swim practice. And I think that's just so huge as an indicator of her investment.
It's a great point.
Every kid's different. You figure your kids out along the way. And I think that one mistake is you can't build your kids. Each kid's personality is different and how they respond to things is different. So you kind of have to figure it out along the way.
You also brought up another point, which I thought was interesting. You talked about the little kids, the younger kids who are with the iPads because their siblings are swimming. How do you manage the demands of kids playing different sports, especially if you have more than a couple kids?
And I was fortunate that I was home, so I was able to do probably more than some people who have job commitments. But there were times where I was dropping off from practice and picking up and where I was like 4 hours in the car, just like on a hamster wheel going 5 miles. I was fortunate that both of my boys tended to play. They're only 14 months apart, so they tended to play the same sports at the same time. So
nice.
That helped a lot. You just kind of have to get in with the other parents and do carpools and find a way to make it work because you want your kids to have that aspect, especially kids. Like I keep seeing the statistics about how many kids are obese and out of shape and where we're headed. And I just think more than ever, it's really important to get your kids to do something. Like I keep saying to Jake and Jenny with Jax is only one, but I'm like, I don't envy you having to raise a kid right now. There's so many outside forces that are negative right now that you have to battle against that are really hard. I give them a lot of credit for the parents right now for what they have to deal with. It's tough.
So that kind of brings us full circle to what we started with, Chris, talking about, I know, and you and I have had umpteen conversations about this, about why we let our kids play a contact sport, is that there is so much benefit of everything you talked about, just being a member of a team and being active. And it is really hard now to keep your kids away from their phones, away from the computers, away from the snacks and things that are just unhealthy for them.
Right.
Sports does so much of that.
Right.
So many benefits.
I mean, just think like if you're out of football practice for an hour or two every night, that's an hour or two you're not on the phone or you're not on the computer or you're doing something physical for your body. And you listen to players, no matter what age they stop playing a sport, most of them say they're going to miss the locker room the most. The guys they play with, the girls that they're with, their teammates. You can't duplicate that kind of just willy-nilly through life. I think it's such an important thing for kids to be a part of a team and to love on other people and know that those people are there for them when they need somebody. I mean, Sydney, one of her teammates, just got married, swim teammates from Notre Dame, and they all had such a good time being back together. And she said it was just like we were in college again. You can always count on those people no matter how old you are. So who doesn't want that for their kids?
Absolutely. Chris, we so appreciate you joining us. It was interesting talking about podcasts. You're very entertaining, funny podcasts with your family.
Talk about oversharing sometimes, yeah.
Oh my gosh. But in a hilarious fashion. What made you want to do the podcast?
The podcast started, we actually have done it for 5 or 6 years. And we felt like through Mike's show on ESPN, our family had always been fodder for good stories that come up while he was on air. Like my son say, you always knew going in that anything you do might end up on air.
This was payback.
Yes, they just grew up with that. And it was just a natural progression that people felt like they got to know our family on a personal level. So we did it just to extend that a little bit more. And
Sure.
selfishly, it was a way for our family to get together and just be together for an hour or 45 minutes. So it doesn't happen as often now because everybody's busy with babies and things like that. For a while, it was a really good vehicle to bring the family together, and we had fun with it.
Chris, I have to tell you a funny story. This is years ago when you and I first started doing some stuff together. I told you I just never been a sports radio person, right? I got to know you. I was like, I should probably listen to Mike Golic. And I turned it on. And literally the moment I turned it on, he was talking about Mike had bet some rando guy that this guy was saying that the Cowboys would make it to the Super Bowl. And your husband said, I'll bet you your salary that they don't. And literally as I was turning on the radio, it was Mike going, yeah, I just got a call from my wife that I'm not allowed to take that bet.
Or I have to make that kind of thing. Yeah.
I almost crashed my car. I was laughing so hard.
It's interesting when we walk on campus, there's so many kids who say they grew up listening to Mike on the air. One of their goals always was to be a show that you could be in the car with your kids and to worry about what you're going to hear. It makes us feel very old that these kids are in college and older. But I was in middle school and I'd be driving in the car with my parents and we'd listen to you every day. But there's something nice about that too, that parents had a vehicle to talk to their kids and sports brought them together again because they'd listen and they'd talk and they'd probably laugh at the idiot stuff my husband was doing. But
once again, what sports does is it's a community.
yeah,
You're just this something about being in the collective of watching any sport and in a theater, at a concert, it's all that same sort of, but typically if you're at a sporting event, you all have this collective sort of desire for your team to win. And there's just nothing like it.
Yep. I'm leaving for Ireland tomorrow to go to the Notre Dame game.
Oh
And
my goodness.
there's supposed to be 40,000 Notre Dame fans coming.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Yeah. So, yeah. So talk about community. It's going to be in Dublin, in the bars probably, but yeah.
Boy, 40,000 Notre Dame fans descending on Dublin.
Dublin. Yes. Well,
I think people are always really surprised to learn how small
Mhm.
of a student body there is at Notre Dame because the fan base is so enormous. And was
Right.
it 5,000 or 6,000 students?
it's 8,500.
8,500. That's
That.
it. Yeah.
Wow.
But the camaraderie, the fan base, the number of people I know who have a leprechaun tattooed on their ankle who didn't
Right.
go to Notre Dame probably outweighs the number who do.
But that's what I was going to say. They call them Subway alumni. The amount of people who didn't have any affiliation with Notre Dame, but grew up loving them the numbers are huge. So it's amazing. But like you said, Beth, it's community. It's like feeling a part of something. And I think that's the great thing about college football is that's your community.
It was very kind of you, Chris, as you're preparing to go to Ireland.
Yes.
To take
Thank
time
you.
out of your busy packing schedule to spend some time with us.
You guys are some fun. It's good to see you. You're doing a great thing. So keep it up. Go Irish.
Yeah.
She said, there are plenty of people who poke holes in kids' dreams. It's
Yes.
a- fill their bucket of confidence. What a great way to represent just supporting kids, right?
That was
Right.
so. She said I would never put out anyone's spark.
I
I
think
know.
that could apply to so many things too.
Yeah. And I think that's good advice. When we talk about with sports, about all the travel and all the, sometimes it's just let them play to have fun.
A lot of really great insights and lessons.
She touched on so many things from just down to earth, good kids loving sports to collegiate stuff to elite athletes in the pros. I want to say put a fork in it, maybe like spike the ball. We're done.
How about until next time, we'll continue to tackle topics related to kids and sports safety, pun intended.